I was sipping my morning coffee, enjoying the peaceful sounds of my little farm, when I heard it. The frantic, panicked quacking of my ducks, then the barking. My stomach dropped. I sprinted toward the noise, coffee sloshing onto my hand, and what I saw made my blood boil. Karen's dog was in my yard, its eyes locked onto my flock, tail wagging with excitement. My ducks scattered in every direction, wings flapping wildly as they tried to escape. I shouted, trying to scare the dog off, but it was having too much fun. Feathers flew into the air as the dog lunged, chasing my ducks straight into the pond. The water erupted with frantic splashes, and I barely had time to react before I saw Karen standing at the edge of my property, arms crossed, watching with amusement. "Relax," she called out, rolling her eyes. "They're just birds." "Just birds?" I clenched my fists, taking a deep breath to stop myself from saying something that might make me the bad guy in this situation. My ducks weren't just birds. They were part of my farm, part of my life. They trusted me to keep them safe. I stormed over to her, barely keeping my voice steady. "Your dog is trespassing on my property and terrorizing my ducks. Keep it on a leash." Karen scoffed, flipping her blonde bob over her shoulder. "Oh, come on. You're being dramatic. Ducks can fly, can't they? They'll be fine." I gritted my teeth. "That's not the point. Your dog has no business being here. This is my land, and if you don't keep it under control, I will involve animal control." Her face twisted into an exaggerated expression of mock fear. "Oh, I'm so scared," she laughed. "It's a dog, not a wolf. Chill out." I exhaled sharply, realizing there was no reasoning with her. She turned and strutted away, calling her dog, which trotted after her, still wagging its tail. My ducks huddled in the water, traumatized but unharmed for now. That was the first time it happened, and as much as I wished it were the last, I had no idea that this was just the beginning of outright war. The next day, I reinforced my fencing. I added a few extra deterrents just in case, but Karen was a special kind of entitled. She wasn't the type to respect boundaries, whether they were physical fences or basic human decency. A few days later, I was tending to my vegetable garden when I heard it again, the telltale sound of barking and panicked quacking. My stomach twisted into knots as I sprinted toward the pond. There it was again, Karen's dog, tearing through my yard like it owned the place, sending my ducks scattering in every direction. And there she was, standing with her arms crossed, watching again. "Karen," I yelled, my voice thick with frustration. "Get your dog off my property." She smirked. "Oh, come on, they need the exercise." I wanted to scream. Instead, I forced myself to breathe. "This is the last warning. Next time, I'm calling the authorities." She let out an exaggerated sigh. Fine. Come on, Max." The dog took one last half-hearted lunge toward a duck before trotting back to her. I watched as they disappeared into their yard, my blood boiling. I knew her type. Entitled, dismissive, someone who had never faced real consequences in her life. I should have called animal control right then and there, but I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. That was a mistake. A few days later, it escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. I was inside enjoying a quiet afternoon when I heard an ear-piercing shriek. It wasn't a duck this time. It was Karen. I rushed outside just in time to see her running full speed across my property, arms flailing as my geese chased her down. Oh yes, she had messed with the wrong birds. And this was only the beginning. Karen's shriek cut through the air like a siren, sharp and panicked. I froze for a split second, processing the sight in front of me. Karen, always so smug, always so entitled, was sprinting across my yard, her expensive sandals slapping against the dirt as she flailed her arms like a woman possessed. And behind her, in perfect formation, were my geese. Now, if you've never dealt with geese before, let me explain something. Ducks may be cute, but geese are warriors. My geese don't run from danger, they are the danger. And right now, they had their sights locked on the enemy, Karen. She tripped over a tree root and nearly face-planted before scrambling to her feet, breathless and disoriented. "Call them off," she screeched, barely managing to dodge a lunging goose that was aiming straight for her ankles. I crossed my arms and leaned against the fence, watching the scene unfold. "Huh," I said, pretending to think. "I thought you said they were just birds." Her face twisted in fury, but she was too busy running to respond. "Now, before anyone thinks I'm cruel, let me clarify. I did not send my geese after her. They simply took initiative. They had witnessed her dog terrorizing my ducks, and geese have a very simple way of dealing with threats: eliminate them. Eventually, Karen made it to the edge of my property and stumbled over the fence, gasping for air. My geese stopped their pursuit, standing at the border like proud little sentinels, watching her with their beady, judgmental eyes. She turned back toward me, her face beet red with embarrassment and fury. This is ridiculous," she stammered. "You trained those demons to attack me." I raised an eyebrow. I didn't train them to do anything. Maybe they just don't like entitled people. Karen let out an incoherent scream of frustration before storming back toward her house, muttering something about a lawsuit. I wasn't worried. She had no case, no proof of any wrongdoing on my part. My geese were defending their territory, something her dog had failed to understand. I thought maybe now she'd learn her lesson. I was wrong. The next escalation. The next morning, I found something that made my blood run cold. My fence, reinforced after her dog's first attack, had been tampered with. It wasn't broken completely, but the wire ties securing part of it had been loosened, leaving a gap wide enough for a medium-sized dog to squeeze through. I stared at it for a long moment, my heart pounding in my chest. There was no way this was an accident. I had just checked the fence yesterday. It was sturdy, locked in place. Someone had messed with it, and I had a very good idea who. Fury bubbled inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. Losing my temper wouldn't fix anything. Instead, I grabbed my tools and repaired the fence, making sure it was even stronger than before. Then, I set up a simple security camera facing that section of my property. If Karen wanted to play dirty, fine, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying everything in my head, my anger simmering just below the surface. Then came the breaking point, the final straw. The next afternoon, I was in my kitchen washing some vegetables from my garden when I heard the noise. The barking, the panicked quacking, again. I dropped everything and bolted outside, my heart slamming against my ribs. And there it was, Karen's dog inside my yard, chasing my ducks in wild circles. The fence I had just reinforced, it had been pushed open. Someone had deliberately pulled back the wiring to let the dog in. I didn't even hesitate. I sprinted straight to Karen's house and banged on the door so hard I thought it might come off the hinges. She opened it, looking unbothered, sipping from a wine glass. "What?" she drawled, as if I was inconveniencing her. I pointed furiously toward my property. "Your dog is in my yard again. You tampered with my fence." She smirked, leaning against the door frame. "I have no idea what you're talking about." I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. "I'm done playing nice, Karen. If you don't get your dog off my property right now, I'm calling animal control." Her expression darkened. "You wouldn't dare." I pulled out my phone and started dialing. She screeched and shoved past me, running toward my yard, frantically calling for her dog. By the time she reached the fence, my geese had already mobilized, and this time, they were not playing around. Karen versus the geese, round 2. The second Karen stepped onto my property, the leader of my geese, a particularly feisty one named Samson, spread his wings and let out a deep, guttural honk. It was the warning honk. Karen froze, her dog still having the time of its life, completely ignored her commands to come back. Samson took a step forward, the rest of the flock followed. Karen turned, her face twisted with fear. No, but it was too late. Samson charged. Karen let out a piercing scream as she spun around and ran. Her dog, loyal but not stupid, immediately bolted through the open fence, tail tucked between its legs. Karen wasn't so lucky. She tripped again, this time landing in a shallow puddle of mud near my garden. The geese swarmed around her, honking in outrage, flapping their wings aggressively. She shrieked, swatting at them as she scrambled to her feet, slipping and sliding. I stood back, arms crossed, watching the karma unfold in real time. Finally, she managed to crawl her way out of the yard, gasping for breath, covered in mud and grass stains. She turned toward me, her eyes blazing with hatred. "This isn't over," she spat. I wiped my hands on my jeans and shrugged. "Oh, I think it is." She stormed off, her dog slinking behind her. I took a deep breath, exhaling slowly. My geese, satisfied that they had once again vanquished the enemy, strutted back toward the pond like victorious soldiers. That night, I uploaded the footage from my security camera. It showed exactly what I suspected. Karen sneaking onto my property in the early hours, loosening the fence, setting the stage for her dog to get in. I sent the footage to animal control, and the next morning, I got a call that made me grin ear to ear. Karen was about to face real consequences. She just didn't know it yet. And I was more than ready to watch it all unfold. The next morning, I was sipping my coffee, watching my ducks waddle around in the golden morning light. Everything seemed peaceful, too peaceful after last night's showdown. I half expected Karen to do something stupid, but for now, there was silence. Maybe, just maybe, she'd finally gotten the message. I should have known better, because less than an hour later, I heard it. The barking, the quacking. But this time, there was something different, something that made my stomach clench with immediate dread. The screams. Not Karen this time. My ducks. I dropped my mug, barely noticing as it shattered against the porch. My feet were moving before my brain could catch up, sprinting full speed toward the noise. As I rounded the corner to my yard, my breath hitched in my throat. Karen's dog had gone beyond chasing. This time, it had a duck in its mouth. My heart stopped. One of my younger ducks, barely more than a duckling, was flailing in the jaws of the oversized mutt. Its tiny wings beat desperately against the dog's face, but it was useless. The dog shook its head violently, sending feathers flying into the air. Something inside me snapped. "Drop it," I bellowed, my voice so loud it startled even me. The dog froze for a fraction of a second, just long enough for me to close the distance. Fueled by pure rage, I lunged forward, grabbing a bucket of water from the side of the house and hurling it at the dog. The cold shock made it yelp and finally loosen its grip. My poor duckling tumbled to the ground, shivering and gasping, barely able to move. I didn't have time to process my emotions. I scooped up the terrified bird and turned just in time to see Karen standing at my fence. She was smiling. My vision blurred red. "Are you out of your mind?" I roared, cradling the trembling duck in my arms. "Your dog nearly killed my duck?" Karen tilted her head, her arms crossed over her chest. "Oh, calm down. It's called the food chain." That was it. That was the moment I knew there was no reasoning with her. No more warnings, no more second chances. I set my duckling down gently and turned toward her, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. "You think this is funny?" My voice was eerily calm now, too calm. She shrugged. "It's nature, sweetie. Maybe your birds should learn to defend themselves." I exhaled slowly, forcing myself not to say something I'd regret. "All right, Karen," I said, my voice even. "You want nature? You're about to get it." Her smirk faltered for the first time. "Excuse me." I took a step closer to the fence, my eyes locking onto hers. "You just declared war." She opened her mouth, probably to toss another snarky remark, but I was already turning away, pulling my phone out of my pocket. I had given her every opportunity to stop. I had warned her, and now she was about to find out what happened when you push someone too far. I dialed animal control. Karen saw what I was doing and immediately started shrieking. "You can't do that. You have no proof." I turned my phone toward her, showing the security footage from my camera, the one I had set up right where she tampered with my fence. The footage was crystal clear, time-stamped and everything. The color drained from her face. "Say hi to animal control, Karen," I said flatly as the call connected. She let out a frustrated scream and bolted, running straight for her house. I didn't chase her. I didn't need to. I had everything I needed, and now I was going to make damn sure she paid for it. Animal control arrived faster than I expected. Apparently, Karen already had multiple complaints against her, and my security footage was just the nail in the coffin. By the time they knocked on her door, she was shaking with barely contained rage. She tried to lie her way out of it, of course, but the footage didn't lie. Her face turned an impressive shade of red as the officer handed her a hefty fine. But that wasn't even the best part. She was given a formal warning. If her dog was caught off leash one more time, it would be seized. Karen turned toward me, her expression pure hatred. "This is harassment," she shrieked. "You set me up." I smiled. "No, Karen. I warned you." Her lips curled into a snarl. "You'll regret this." I shrugged. "We'll see." And with that, I turned and walked away. That night, I checked on my injured duckling. Thankfully, it was shaken but okay, just a few lost feathers and a bruised wing. My geese sat around it protectively, almost like they understood what had happened. I smiled to myself. Karen thought she had won. She thought she could bully me, let her dog terrorize my birds, and get away with it. But now she was one step away from losing her dog entirely. And if she thought I was done, she had no idea what was coming next. Karen had pushed me too far. She had let her dog run wild on my property, terrorizing my ducks and nearly killing one of my youngest. She had ignored every warning, dismissed every attempt at reason, and now she was one step away from losing her dog altogether. But somehow, I knew she wasn't done. I wasn't done either. That night, as I checked on my little duckling, still shaken but safe, an idea began forming in my head, a perfect idea. Karen wanted to let her dog loose on my birds? Fine. It was time to show her that my birds could fight back. Now, if you've never had the pleasure of dealing with geese, let me enlighten you. Ducks are cute, gentle creatures. They'll run from trouble before they ever fight. Geese do not care. A goose will square up with an alligator if it so much as looks at it funny. And I had 6 of them. It was time to turn them into a tactical defense unit. For the next few days, I made a point of feeding my geese right near the front of my property, close to the fence. I let them roam freely in the yard at all hours, conditioning them to be ready at a moment's notice. I even encouraged their natural aggression, gently riling them up with food rewards whenever they honked at unfamiliar noises. They caught on fast. By the end of the week, my geese had become a border patrol force. If anything unfamiliar stepped onto my property, they reacted immediately. All I had to do was wait. And then, like clockwork, Karen delivered herself right into my hands. It happened on a quiet afternoon. I was inside finishing up some paperwork when I heard it, low barking from across the fence. I glanced at my security camera feed. There was Karen, standing near the fence line, pretending to be on a phone call. Her dog, however, was off-leash, and that wasn't a coincidence. She was trying to provoke me. Maybe she thought I'd rush outside and start yelling. Maybe she thought I'd call animal control again, giving her another reason to cry about how unfairly she was being treated. What she didn't realize was that I was already 10 steps ahead of her. I didn't need to do anything because my geese, they were already on it. The moment Karen's dog squeezed through the loosened fence boards, all 6 of my geese snapped to attention like a well-trained military unit. The lead goose, Samson, my fearless little general, let out a low, ominous honk. Karen's dog hesitated, ears flicking forward. Samson took a single step closer, the others followed. The dog tensed, its playful posture shifting as it realized something was off. Then, Samson spread his massive wings and charged. All 6 geese erupted into a deafening chorus of honks, flapping their wings like a battalion of angry banshees. They surged forward, their beady little eyes locked onto their unfortunate target. Karen's dog, previously so bold, so confident, took one look at the goose army barreling toward it and noped out of there. It turned on its heels so fast it skidded in the dirt, yelping as it sprinted back toward the fence. But the geese weren't letting it off that easy. Samson lunged forward, pecking the dog's tail as it bolted, sending it into a terrified frenzy. Another goose, Daisy, flapped her wings so hard she actually lifted off the ground for a second, adding to the chaotic display. The dog howled in pure terror, and that's when I heard it. The sound I had been waiting for, Karen's scream. I turned my head just in time to see Karen once again bolting toward my yard in a desperate attempt to save her dog. She was already shrieking before she even reached the fence. Call them off. Call them off. I stepped out onto my porch, slowly sipping my lemonade, looking as relaxed as possible. Oh, I called out. I thought you said they were just birds? Her face twisted in sheer panic as she scrambled toward the fence, nearly tripping over herself. Her dog, in a desperate attempt to escape, miscalculated its jump over the fence and instead got stuck between the wooden slats, flailing and whimpering. The geese closed in. Karen shrieked louder than I had ever heard before, launching herself at the fence and yanking her dog free just as Samson snapped his beak inches away from its tail. She stumbled backward, collapsing into the dirt, her arms wrapped around her trembling dog. And my geese? They lined up along the fence, honking triumphantly like they had just conquered a small country. Karen sat there, panting, covered in dirt, clutching her terrified dog, while my geese loomed over her like vengeful little warriors. She looked up at me, seething. You did this on purpose." I raised an eyebrow. "I didn't do anything. You let your dog onto my property again." I gestured to my geese. "They just handled it." She opened her mouth, then closed it, realizing she had nothing. She knew she had been caught. She knew she couldn't call animal control, not after she had been warned. And the best part? She was too embarrassed to tell anyone that she had just been chased down by a bunch of angry birds. After that day, something miraculous happened. Karen, she stopped. Her dog was suddenly always on a leash. She stopped lingering near my fence, stopped trying to provoke me. She didn't even look in my direction when she drove past my property. The only thing I ever heard from her again was a quiet, muttered complaint to another neighbor about how birds are demonic creatures. I smiled. Maybe she finally learned something. Or maybe, just maybe, she just didn't want to risk round 3. For a few days after the incident, I thought I'd won. Karen had retreated, her dog was no longer running loose, and my geese had officially established themselves as the undisputed champions of the property. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't the type to back down so easily. Entitled people like her, they hate losing. And sure enough, just as I was starting to enjoy my newfound peace, she came back with an even bigger, even dumber plan. It was late one evening when I first got suspicious. I had just finished putting my ducks in for the night and was heading back toward the house when I noticed something weird. The geese were agitated. They weren't honking yet, but they were pacing, their heads bobbing up and down like they were picking up on something I couldn't see. I frowned. They never acted like this unless there was a problem. I scanned the property, and that's when I saw it. Karen, standing near my fence. Only this time, she wasn't alone. She had brought a broom. I watched, stunned, as she hopped the fence like some kind of middle-aged action star, gripping the broom like it was a medieval weapon. For a second, I was too shocked to react, but then I realized what she was about to do. She was trying to scare my geese away. Apparently, she had convinced herself that if she could make the geese run off, I wouldn't have them as guards anymore, and she could go back to letting her dog roam free. It was the dumbest thing I had ever witnessed, but I wasn't about to stop her. She was about to learn the hard way that you don't pick a fight with geese. The moment Karen stepped foot into my yard, Samson, the alpha goose, locked onto her like a heat-seeking missile. His head snapped toward her, and his eyes darkened with pure, unfiltered rage. And then he charged. Karen barely had time to react before 6 pounds of furious honking exploded toward her at full speed. She let out a startled yelp and swung the broom wildly, but it was already too late. Samson ducked under the swing with shocking speed and went straight for the ankles. Peck! Karen screamed. She stumbled backward, trying to shake him off, but by now the other geese had joined the fight. Daisy, my second in command, flapped her massive wings and let out an ear-splitting war cry, lunging forward and smacking Karen in the side of the head with a perfectly timed wing slap. Karen shrieked like a banshee. Honk! 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 The noise was deafening. The sheer force of 6 furious geese attacking at once was overwhelming. Karen tried to run, but she had nowhere to go. Every direction she turned, more geese. She swung her broom wildly, trying to defend herself, but it was like trying to fight off a swarm of feathery demons. Samson grabbed onto her pant leg with his beak and refused to let go, flapping his wings aggressively as he dragged her backward. I stood on my porch, sipping my lemonade, watching the chaos unfold like a spectator at a gladiator match. This was beautiful. Karen finally managed to rip herself free, sprinting toward the fence, her face twisted in pure terror. But just as she reached the fence, she made a fatal mistake. She tripped. Karen went down like a sack of bricks, landing face first into a muddy puddle near my vegetable garden. For a split second, the entire world seemed to pause. And then the geese saw their chance. They surrounded her in a perfect semicircle, honking furiously, blocking her escape as she flailed helplessly in the mud. She was utterly trapped, panicked, and covered in dirt. She tried to crawl away, but Samson wasn't about to let her off easy. With one last mighty battle cry, he jumped onto her back. Karen screamed, so loud I'm surprised she didn't break glass. She shot up so fast she knocked herself backward again, flailing in the mud like a fish out of water. The geese stood proudly over her, hissing in victory. Karen, soaked, humiliated, and gasping for air, finally managed to scramble back toward the fence. She half crawled, half ran toward it, flipped over the top in pure desperation, and collapsed onto the other side. Silence. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Karen, completely out of breath, covered in mud, scratches, and what I could only assume was goose drool, looked up at me with a face of pure, murderous rage. Her voice was shaking with humiliation. "You did this on purpose." I took a slow sip of my lemonade and smirked. "I didn't do anything," I said innocently. "Looks like you messed around and found out." Karen opened her mouth like she was about to start screaming, but at that exact moment, Samson let out one final, victorious honk. Karen flinched so hard she nearly fell over again. Then, without another word, she turned and sprinted away, disappearing into her house like a defeated villain at the end of a bad movie. After that day, Karen never messed with me again. Her dog was suddenly always on a leash. She stopped hanging around my fence. In fact, she started avoiding me altogether. She didn't even want to look in my direction. The best part? The neighborhood never let her forget it. For weeks after, people kept making little comments. "Hey Karen, you should try out for track. Those geese had you running real fast." Or, "Heard you had a mud bath in your backyard the other day. How's your skin?" Even the mailman got in on it. One day, as he handed me a package, he smirked and said, "Those geese of yours? Better security than the police." I just grinned. Damn right they are. After the Battle of the Geese, Karen went into full-on damage control. I could tell she was desperate to spin the story into something that made her look like the victim. But the problem was, she had no allies left. You see, when you're an entitled Karen, people put up with you until you embarrass yourself in such a ridiculous way that even your last remaining enablers jump ship. And that's exactly what had happened. Karen had been publicly humiliated, and no amount of screaming or complaining could erase the mental image of her being taken down by a squadron of angry geese. But that didn't mean she wouldn't try. The day after the incident, Karen must have spent the entire night stewing in rage, because she showed up at my fence at the crack of dawn, looking disheveled and pissed off. Her hair was a mess, her clothes were wrinkled, and she had a wild, unhinged look in her eyes, the look of a woman who had lost the war but refused to admit defeat. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "I'm calling the authorities on you. You think this is funny? You trained those birds to attack me." I took a slow sip of my coffee, perfectly calm. "No, Karen," I said. "You trespassed onto my property. They just handled things the way nature intended." She growled in frustration, stomping her foot like a tantrum-throwing toddler. "You're a dangerous neighbor. You can't just have a bunch of rabid birds running around attacking people." I raised an eyebrow. "They're not rabid," I said casually. "They're just really smart. You know, geese remember faces. Samson probably recognized you as the woman who let her dog terrorize my ducks." Karen's face twitched. She knew she was fighting a losing battle, but she was too deep into her own entitlement to back down. So, she did what all Karens do when they can't win an argument. She made a false report. Not even 2 hours later, a county animal control officer showed up at my property. I wasn't surprised. Karen was the type to weaponize authority when things didn't go her way. But she didn't realize something important. I had evidence. The officer stepped out of his truck, looking mildly confused as he glanced around my property. "I got a call about, aggressive birds?" I had to bite back a laugh. Instead, I put on my most polite smile. Let me guess. Karen." The officer sighed. "Yeah." He already looked so tired, like he'd been dealing with her brand of nonsense before. "Would you like to see the security footage?" I asked, already pulling out my phone. The officer looked relieved. "That would actually be great." I played the footage for him. The whole glorious video of Karen breaking onto my property, wielding a broom like some deranged bird-fighting warrior, and getting absolutely obliterated by my geese. When the video ended, the officer tried so hard to keep a straight face, but I saw it, the slight twitch at the corner of his lips. "Welp," he said, clearing his throat. "That's pretty conclusive. She trespassed, provoked them, and then got attacked because geese." I nodded. "Exactly." The officer exhaled, rubbing his temples. "I'm going to have to talk to her." "Oh, please do." And that's when things got really good. I watched from my porch as the officer made his way to Karen's house. She stormed outside, clearly expecting that he was about to take my geese away or fine me or something equally ridiculous. What she didn't expect was what happened next. The officer immediately shut her down. "Ma'am, we reviewed security footage of the incident, and you were trespassing on private property." Karen blanched. "That's not the point," she shrieked. "Her birds. Your complaint has no merit." The officer continued. completely unfazed. However, you may be in violation of trespass laws. Would you like to discuss that? Karen went so pale, I thought she might faint. No. She provoked me, she tried to argue. The officer simply shook his head. The footage suggests otherwise. Consider this a warning. If you set foot on that property again, the landowner is well within their rights to press charges. I swear I saw Karen physically deflate. She had lost. Completely. Utterly. Finally. And I had won. Karen must have realized how badly she embarrassed herself, because after that visit from the authorities, she went full radio silence. No more yelling, no more smug looks, no more letting her dog roam free. She even started avoiding me completely. But the best part? The neighborhood never let her live it down. Word spread like wildfire about how she had tried to fight a bunch of geese and got her entitled as handed to her. People started calling her the bird brawler behind her back. One neighbor, who had also been on the receiving end of her entitled nonsense, printed out a meme and taped it to the community bulletin board. It was a picture of Samson, wings spread wide, with the words, "Trespassers will be honked." I nearly cried laughing. Even the local mailman got in on it. One day, as he handed me a package, he grinned and said, "Your geese should be deputized." Honestly, I said, smiling, I think they already have been. Karen, humiliated and out of options, finally gave up. She stopped trying to push boundaries, she kept her dog leashed, and she never, ever stepped foot near my property again. It was over. My ducks were safe, my geese were victorious, and Karen, she had officially learned the most important lesson of all: mess around with my birds, and you will find out. With Karen finally put in her place, life on my farm returned to peace. The ducks waddled happily around the pond, no longer fearing an unexpected attack. My geese patrolled the property like feathered sentinels, strutting around with their heads held high as if they knew they had won a great battle. And me? I could finally enjoy my morning coffee without the sound of frantic quacking and barking ruining the moment. Karen had been officially defeated, and it wasn't just me who enjoyed the victory. You see, Karen wasn't just hated by me. She had been a problem for the entire neighborhood. Once the word spread about her geese-induced humiliation, she found herself on the receiving end of a lot of karma. The neighborhood group chat, "Yes, we have one," turned into a full-blown roast session. People started sharing their own Karen horror stories. Turns out, she had annoyed way more people than I thought. She once yelled at my kids for riding their bikes past her house. She tried to get my husband's work truck towed because she said it ruined the aesthetic of the street. She called the HOA because my Halloween decorations offended her. The stories kept rolling in, and every time someone told a new Karen horror story, someone else would reply, "Well, at least she's too scared to mess with geese." It became an inside joke. Even better, the meme of Samson, my fearless goose, wings outstretched, became a local legend. It showed up on the bulletin board, then in emails, and eventually, someone even made stickers. One day, I went to the local gas station and saw a car with a bumper sticker that read, "Respect the honk." I almost lost it. Karen, meanwhile, stayed quiet. No more entitled rants. No more smug remarks. No more complaints about how the world was out to get her. She had been humbled, and the best part, she had to live with the knowledge that the entire town saw her as the goose lady. Honestly, it was perfect. One day, about a month later, something strange happened. Karen showed up at my fence. At first, I tensed up, preparing for another dramatic showdown. But she looked different. Gone was the smugness. Gone was the entitlement. Instead, she looked embarrassed. She took a deep breath. I wanted to apologize. I blinked. "Excuse me." She shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I shouldn't have let my dog run wild on your property. And I definitely shouldn't have trespassed. I guess I just didn't like being told no." I stared at her, trying to figure out if this was some kind of trap. "Okay." She sighed. I didn't realize how much everyone in the neighborhood disliked me until all of this happened. She let out a small, awkward laugh. "I guess I needed a wake-up call." I crossed my arms. "And Samson gave it to you?" Her face turned bright red. "Yes." There was a long silence. "Then I actually looked up geese after that." She chuckled, shaking her head. "Did you know that in ancient Rome, geese were used as guard animals?" I smirked. "Yeah, they saved an entire city once." She sighed again. "Figures." There was another pause. "So," she said hesitantly, I got a fence put up. A real one. My dog won't be bothering your birds anymore. I raised an eyebrow. Are you actually going to keep it on a leash? She looked a little ashamed. Yeah. For the first time ever, I saw a flicker of actual remorse in her eyes. She wasn't faking it. I nodded slowly. Good. She hesitated, then mumbled. Thanks for not pressing charges. I shrugged. Thanks for finally listening. And then, just like that, she walked away. Would she ever be likable? Probably not. But at least she finally understood one thing. You do not mess with my geese. Life goes on, better than ever. With Karen out of my hair, life on the farm was better than ever. My ducks finally lived in peace. My geese held their heads high, knowing they had successfully defended their territory. I enjoyed the sweet, sweet silence of no longer having to deal with Karen's nonsense. And best of all, the entire town now had a newfound respect for geese. People would walk by my fence and nod at Samson like he was some kind of celebrity. Kids in the neighborhood pointed and whispered, "That's the goose that took down Karen." Even the local sheriff, who had heard about the whole thing, stopped by one day just to say, "Best self-defense system I've ever seen." I grinned. I should start charging for goose security services. He laughed. Honestly, people might pay for that. And you know what? I wouldn't be surprised. Because after what happened, the whole town had learned a valuable lesson. At the end of the day, Karen learned the hard way that actions have consequences. Geese are not to be underestimated. Trespassing is a bad idea, especially when the animals are smarter than you. And me? I learned that sometimes the best revenge is letting nature do the work for you. I never had to lift a finger. All it took was a few highly motivated birds with attitude to take down the most entitled neighbor I'd ever met. And honestly, that was so much more satisfying than anything I could have done myself. Now, I got to ask, have you ever had to deal with a Karen like this? Do you have a crazy neighbor story? Drop it in the comments. Let's hear how you handled it. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe, because trust me, there's plenty more where this came from. And if you ever need protection, forget guard dogs. Get yourself a goose. You won't regret it. Honk honk.